Manchester.
Okay, I'm sure that there'll be lots of questions from the floor, so just to point out that Ben over here will be running the mic, so we'll take as many questions from you as we can, so I'm sure David will be very popular. Let's start with the obvious question. Where were you in your career? What were you doing in your career when this opportunity came to you?
Well, I had a commercial contract with a soft drink company in the States, and I was their spokesman. And so John Landis, who's an avid Tab drinker. Anybody remember Tab as a drink? Yeah, disgusting stuff. But so John's this avid Tab drinker. In fact, he shipped cases of it over to London when we were working. So he knew me from those commercials, and he took a meeting with me at his office. And we basically sat down and talked about, our lives. And I told him that I had done, a bicycle tour around Ireland, and I had studied acting in London. And so he goes, well, here's the script. Read this script, call me tomorrow. And I read the script. It had things like, David turns into a werewolf. I go, oh, that's interesting. And that was about the extent of it. I called him the next day, and he goes, you want to be a werewolf? You got to meet Rick Baker. And that's how it happened.
What do you think John saw in you that made you right to play David?
Well, I only know this sort of answer because John and I have done panels before, but he knew that he wanted a couple of likable guys for his two leads, and he thought that if I could be likable in these soda commercials that I was doing, that he could, that I had a chance of carrying the role of his. It's sort of autobiographical. I don't know if people know John Landis wrote this script when he was 21 years old, and it was the movie he always wanted to make. And when he became successful with Animal House and the Blues Brothers, he was able to make the film. So I think it was because he thought we were likable guys that we could become likable characters.
And there's real character, there's real chemistry between the two characters. And there he is, there's one of them. There's real chemistry between the two of you. And then, of course, we have that wonderful shock moment right at the very beginning of the film where Jack is taken out.
Yes.
And it's a really bold thing to do, isn't it? You introduce these two guys, they're lovely, they're wonderful, and wham, one of them is killed in a horrific way. Can you tell us a little bit about shooting that?
Yeah, it's true. You show up the first day and you find out, this is your best friend, Jack. Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. So, Griffin and I didn't have a lot of history, but we certainly had mutual friends, and we knew of other people that were mutual friends of ours. So we hit it off right away. And what's interesting about the film is the first day of shooting is the very first scenes that you see in the film, where we're in the truck with the sheep, coming to East, looking to find where East Proctor is, and that whole opening sequence of walking along the moors, talking about what we're going to do on our backpacking trip. That's all the very first, week of shooting. The reason was to give Rick Baker as much time as he needed on the back end of the film to, work on the special effects. So for us, it was great as actors to start the movie at the beginning, because it's an opportunity to sort of get into the film, find out what John Landis was like as a director, find out what we were like as actors, how we were going to rehearse and how we were going to play off each other. So that's how that sort of happened. And then, of course, when the attack comes and Griffin gets attacked, Rick Baker says to him, and Rick has told this story before, which is how I know it. He said to Griffin, now look, I've only got one backup wolf head, so I want you to go really easy when I attack you, because these teeth are very fragile, and it took me 4 months to make this wolf head, so please. So on take one, Griffin gets attacked, and he went crazy. Griffin's like tearing at the wolf, damaging Rick's prized wolf head, and we cut, and Rick's looking at the wolf head and thought, my God, I just told you, just go easy. So he goes, we got to go again. So Rick said, okay. So he got his other wolf head, put in the hard teeth, and on take two, just beat Griffin to death, and really took it. And Griffin, I mean, he's a heck of an actor, and he was acting in that scene, but he was also getting, you know, bitten by Rick Baker in that scene.
I'm a man of a certain age. I was 15 when the movie came out, so I just
we were all much younger, weren't we?
I just want to say the words Jenny Agutter and ask you for your memories of Jenny.
Jenny, now, a lot of you could see her, you know, these days in her show where she's playing a nun. I go, I knew her, but when, you know? But Jenny was, she was a real good sport, you know, on this film, because it was basically, you know, there were 4 American guys, John and Rick, and Griffin and I, and Jenny, you know, and so she was a very good sport about it. And, you know, was quite a terrific actress. It turned out I had realized that I had seen her probably 6 times at the National Theater in a production of Equus, the play that she was doing at the National Theater at the time that I was studying acting in London years earlier. And it didn't occur to me. I went, wait a second, you played that stable girl? She says, yes. I went, oh my God, we all had a huge crush on her then. And of course, we all had a huge crush on her throughout the making of the film. And she was a good sport, let me tell you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go straight to the
If anybody
audience.
has a question.
I'm sure we're going to get lots, David.
Hello. It's great to have you here, thanks. Would you come back next year? And if you do, would you bring Rick Baker with you?
If I were invited back, I'd certainly come. I think this is a great show. For the love of horror, what do you think about it, folks? This is a really good show. You know, I have friends that go somewhere every weekend, and I'm not one of those guys. I sort of pick and choose some shows, and there's some quite good shows in the States. But this ranks right up there with the top 5 shows I've been to. And yeah, Rick and I did a show in the Canary Islands 2 years ago. You know, that whole COVID thing was quite a mess, as you all know, and nobody had a chance to go anywhere. So it seems to me that it's such a great turnout, possibly because people have been cooped up for so long, you know. So Rick, though, you know, Rick retired. I think he got tired of young film producers trying to tell him how to do what he does. He's got 7 Academy Awards, you know, at home, at his house. Our film was the first Academy Award that he won. And so he retired. So he's just happy at home creating. I don't know if many of you follow him on Instagram. He's always showing one of his latest Bela Lugosi creations. So he just loves doing nothing more than creating. But he, you know, if he called me and asked me what the show was about, I would give it a very favorable review.
Talking of Rick, I was asking one of the other guests yesterday about the process of being made up and prosthetics for a movie, and I wanted to ask you the same question. So when you're in the makeup chair and you're looking in the mirror and you're seeing this gradual metamorphosis of David into the wolf, I'm sure it must be imprinted on your brain. How long a process was it, and could you literally see that transformation taking place before your very eyes?
Well, you know, Rick, I have to tell you, the very first time I met him was right after I was cast in the part. And, you know, this not often films the life of the film from start to finish. This was one of the faster ones. We started in October, and I met John Landis, and then I went over to Rick Baker's shop. And I remember going in and saying, hi, I'm looking for Rick Baker. And he goes, yeah, that's me. Who are you? I go, I'm David Naughton. He says, what are you playing? I said, I'm playing the role of David. He goes, I feel sorry for you. Nice to meet you. I had no idea what he meant. I found out quickly. So that was October, November, and we started doing all that preliminary makeup, having casts made of my arms, of my legs. I had to do like 5 or 6 head molds, which is not fun really, because you're inside this quick drying cement, and I'd have to hold a pose. He goes, now do a real snarl and hold it. Like, so I'd be there, you know, for 20 minutes while this stuff is drying. And you can't breathe really. It's quite
claustrophobic as well.
Yeah, it's not fun. So he said, okay, I'll see you over in London. You know, so we go to London in February of 1981. We work about 10 weeks on the movie. they're editing it, and in August of that same year, about 9 months later, the film came out. So it was really a very fast start to finish. The transformation scene was the last scene we shot. So we shot the entire movie, wrapped everybody except for me and Rick, and of course John, and a very small film crew, and a couple of Rick's assistants, and we had a week to shoot that transformation scene. So it was 5 days a week of the last week. I was in makeup for 10 hours a day, if you can imagine. My call would be at like 5 a.m., and it'd be Rick and me sitting in the chair, and he'd start. The first thing he'd do is he'd take my hands away. So there goes, coffee or any of that. Try to have lunch, no. And usually the claws would come on first, and he'd work up my arms, and he was layering me with yak hair, believe it or not, strand by strand, and so that's how that happened. And then of course there are facial appliances as well. But I knew more or less by the storyboards, as this scene was storyboarded, little pictures of how the film was going to be shot, more than watching it happen in the makeup chair, because it was such a slow process. I was, I was ready to shoot. So at the end of a 10-hour makeup day, we'd go out on the set, and they'd be waiting for us. The crew call would be late because there was nothing to shoot except whatever I was dressed as. And we'd shoot for maybe 30 minutes to an hour and a half. It depended on which part of the transformation we were shooting. And then it would be done, and John would say, "That's it, we're done, we got it." And Rick would be, "No, wait. This, excuse me, this took 4 months to make. Can't we shoot for a little longer?" And John would say, "Why? What else does it do? Does it do anything else?" Because it was just certain stages of the makeup. So John was very decisive, and we went through it in 5 days, 10 hours a day of makeup.
Just before we come to you, on the back of that, I wanted to ask about the Nazi demons and that dream sequence, because certainly for me, that comes out of the blue. You don't expect it. You've got all this other stuff going on in the movie, and then that sequence. And it's truly nightmarish. I mean, it's a dream, it's a nightmare, but it's truly awful. And again, I wanted to ask you for your memories of shooting that, because it's the dream within a dream, and then he obviously wakes up.
Well, that Nazi demon scene, people are confused by it, or they just realize it's a nightmare. Now, keep in mind, John Landis wrote this when he was 21 years old, and I think one of the most horrific kinds of nightmares that he could have at that age in his life was Nazi demons coming to his house, setting his house on fire and killing his family. So that was the reason for that. During the making of that scene, we shot it on a stage. We were at the Twickenham Studios in London, and what's interesting is that when they, anytime there's fire involved, you have to be very careful, of course, because fire can get its own life. And we had fire marshals on the set, but when they started to light the scene, John was going, keep rolling, keep rolling. He didn't want to cut. So the entire set is being engulfed in flames, and we're still rolling, going, any time now he's going to yell cut. He wouldn't yell cut. So they finally had to say, we have to go in now. He goes, all right, cut. And then they went in and tried to put the fire out. But, it was one of those delicate scenes that you don't want it to get out of hand, but there was certainly a chance of doing that. And it was pretty horrific just to be on the set.
Thank you. Question down here.
Thank you. Hi, David.
Hello.
Hi. I just wanted to ask your memories with working with Brian Glover and also Rick Mail, and whether you have any props still from the movie that you took home.
Props I don't really have. Any of the wolf parts I never wanted to see again, if you can imagine. And most of the wolf stuff was made of foam and latex, and that just decays, it just rots away and dissolves. There are a couple of guys, collectors, friends of Rick Baker's, who have them in these glass bubbles of wolf heads and the body, the original body parts of the wolf, they still have. And they need to be kept up. They have to bring in artists and redo and touch up. And it's sort of a museum piece. And We all wanted the pub sign. Of course, that went to John Landis. The slaughtered lamb, we wanted. I should tell you quickly, there is a restaurant in New York City, if you ever get to Greenwich Village, there's a slaughtered lamb. And I went to it, gosh, it's got to be 20 years ago, and I couldn't get a table. It's like, come on. But I go, it's New York, you know, that's New York for you. But as far as the guys in the pub, well, certainly Rick Mail was unknown at that time, you know, so this was before his career really took off. And Brian Glover, we certainly knew, you know, we were doing our homework. This was before computer, we couldn't Google him, but we found out, of course, who he was. And John Landis cast a number of the actors in the pub from going to theaters and being, you know, seeing them live. I was thinking of David Schofield as the dart player. You know, he goes, "You made me miss." He was in the West End doing The Elephant Man. So there were a lot of, you know, very qualified actors. Griffin and I were kind of playing the outsiders. I mean, it wasn't a big acting job to feel like an outsider walking into that pub. And so we kept our distance. You know, we didn't really want to get real chummy with the other guys because that really wasn't part of our process. So we didn't really get to know them that well.
How much of the film, when you were shooting on location, so shooting in, say, central London, Trafalgar Square, was any of that kind of done on the hoof? Was it done guerrilla style, i.e., you were shooting and there were people around you that genuinely weren't aware that you were making a movie?
Yeah, a lot of that, many times. Like there's a phone booth. We basically had our own phone booth. We tried to pick a corner, put the phone booth on the corner. You remember phone booths? Yeah, what? And so we had the phone booth there, for example, when I'm making a call. And it was just shot, you know, with a small camera. But yeah, we were able to just go about our business and people didn't pay us any attention. I should tell you, the big car crash in Piccadilly Circus, we shot without permission for doing that. So we basically stole that shot. Now, how do you do that on a big, you know? So we had all these cameras all around the rooftops of Piccadilly Circus at 5:30 in the morning, you know, getting just before daybreak. So it was probably the lightest amount of traffic that you can have in Piccadilly, but it's still open. It's not closed. There's no police shutdown. And we basically had stuntmen in cars on all of the avenues that converge on Piccadilly. And on action, they all just came flying into Piccadilly and crashed into each other. And then yelled cut, and they were gone in an instant. So I remember staying up that night because I wanted to see this shot that we were going to basically steal the shot in Piccadilly Circus. Then afterwards, of course, they had a set built where they went and did all the inserts and the all close-up and all this stuff to build the scene. But the actual master of the car accident that if you watch the film, that was just done on the, you know, on the sly, as it were.
My favorite line in the film, with all due respect, is not one of yours and it's not Brian Glover. My favorite line in the film is, "A naked American man stole my balloons." And I wanted to ask about shooting in London Zoo. You're naked, clearly you don't have to have any vanity about yourself, you've got to get in there and do it for real. Was that a similar process to Trafalgar Square and Piccadilly Circus? You just went in or not?
Yeah, you know, these are scenes that I knew were coming, so when you get the schedule of the shoot, you're always looking, okay, when's that scene, you know? And it was sort of farther back in the schedule of shooting in the park. So, you know, and this was a lady who was basically atmosphere, or what they call an extra. She had no idea. She was saying, "Madam, we'd like you to be in this scene. Now, you don't have anything to say, but on action, this man is going to come from behind this bush and just look at you, say something, and then disappear. So you don't have to do or say anything, just stand right there." And she went, "All right." Well, they didn't tell her I'd be naked. They didn't tell her anything. And of course, they got a real reaction from her, like, she didn't dare. I just remember her looking off in the distance, like, where do I look? I should also tell you that there's the scene where I'm running along and I grab the coat. And I just remember saying to the first AD, like, "Why do we have extras way back there?" He goes, those aren't extras, the zoo's open. What do you mean the zoo's open? Because, yeah, we had overstayed the time allotted to shoot these certain areas, so we had to keep shooting. The park's open, the zoo is open, and we're still shooting with me running across, grabbing a coat. That scene leads into, of course, the wolf scene, the wolf cage. And no, those were not Rick Baker makeup specials. Those were 3 real wolves. And so I was a little cautious about that scene, saying, you know, so what's the story with these wolves, you know? And they go, well, they've been fed. I went, oh, that's exciting. So they've been fed, and they asked me, no fast movements, no loud noises. I went, well, I'm not gonna, you know, take my time getting out of this zoo. So the scene was, wake up, see the wolves, and then as cautiously as you can, look and see there's no way out and just go up and over the back. And I said, okay, I'll do that once, and this is gonna be a oneer, so be ready, because I wasn't gonna go back in that cage. And fortunately, I remember waking up and one of the wolves looked at me like, and if you've ever looked at a wolf close, you have no idea what they're thinking. They make a great poker face. They just look at you with these yellow eyes. And I didn't know what the wolf was gonna do, but this female, one of the females, was walking toward me. And so I just said, it's time to go. And that was it. Did that one scene, one take.
You're a braver man than me. If there are any further questions, we will take them.
There's a question.
Just another quick one from me, David.
All right.
I referred to the film in the introduction as an instant classic. What do you think about remakes? Should it be remade? Could it be remade? And could it be bettered?
Well, I don't know if remakes are necessarily better, but you know, I know there's been a lot of talk about it. In fact, there was some serious talk about it with John Landis' son, Max Landis, writing and directing a remake with John Landis being the executive producer. And I imagine a family affair, how would that go? My feeling was, you know, let's leave well enough alone, you know, go write your own script, Max. But, you know, then I said, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. And my feeling is, what do you say when you see a remake? You always compare it to the original. You'll always say, yeah, it was good, but did you see the original? Which makes me think that it would just maybe perpetuate another generation of discovering this film, and people will know, you know, who we are in 2050, who knows?
The original will prevail.
Hi, David.
Hello.
The film soundtrack is incredible. When you were filming some of the scenes, like the transformation scene, for example, did you have those songs in your head when you were filming, or was it a post-production decision?
Yeah, that's all on John Landis. You know, we would talk about music, and one of the songs we wanted was Moon Shadow. Cat Stevens' Moon Shadow. We couldn't get permission to use that song. But everything is post-production. All of it is, you know, going to get permission from artists, record labels to use the songs. Some are what they call public domain, so you can use songs. I know many of you have made little films, and you try to, you know, if you wanted to make a commercial release, you need permission, of course, for the rights to use any of those songs. So I had no idea what songs they were going to use. I had my own little music playing in my head for any of those sort of scenes. And it was interesting to me to see it cut together with music. The first time I saw the film, they screened it for me at Universal, and it was just me alone at a screening of the film in a finished version, which is not the way to see the movie. You know, the way to see this movie is with an audience on a big screen. How many of you have, is there anybody here who hasn't seen the film? Raise your hand. How many of you have seen it on a big screen? Yeah, I know many of you have seen the DVDs, which are terrific, and some, you know, John Landis went back and did some I don't know what, you know, some sound improvements, enhancements, you know, the Dolby Digital and all that. Then it's gone to 4K, which is a fantastic print. But the way to see this movie is on a big screen, so that's what it was intended for. And, you know, that's what after seeing it for the first time in a screening, I was I was quite amused by it. I wanted to see it again because, you know, you remember everything that was going on behind the scene during, so you can, I wasn't really sure where the laughs were. I wasn't sure where the big scares were. So the way to see it was with an audience. So of course, when we opened in New York in August, I remember it was like August 21, 1981, I bring my parents to the movie. And my parents, well, let's just say they weren't the audience for this film. These were not the people that John Landis made this movie for. And so I had to sort of try to prepare my mother and father for what they were about to see. And I said, you know, there's a lot of violence in this film, Mom and Dad. Remember, it's only a movie. You know, I hope you won't be frightened. But what I did realize is in the audience, people left their seats, particularly on those big scares. You know, when Jenny opens the blinds in the hospital bed, and that's a huge scare, and I saw people leave their seats, jump out of their seats. And in the hospital bed, out in the forest, you know, with the big opening of the eyes, that's another huge scare. So we used to go to movies, get in, going, hey, we're in it, can we just stand in the back? And we'd stand in the back just to watch the audience jump at those particular scenes. Maybe that's sort of ghoulish fun, but that was the fun we had doing it.
Well, it is the fun, and I suppose it's the purpose of the movie at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Scary.
David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Before we let you leave the stage, would you do a selfie with yourself and the audience?
Yes. Want me to go down there?
Well, we'll stand up here and we'll get
Okay.
a picture as well. David Naughton.
Hey, thanks, everybody.